Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode. Today we are joined by John Mike Nichols with RMA and local comedian Chris Abels. Guys, I appreciate you swinging by and chatting with me today. Reason I brought you in is because you guys are involved in an upcoming fundraiser for the Parkersburg Homecoming. It's called Comedy Night. It's presented by RMA and it is a fundraiser for the Parkersburg Homecoming. Is that correct?
That is correct. Parkersburg Homecoming is looking to branch out and do a lot of things outside of the traditional homecoming weekend. And this comedy night is one of the things we try to put a footprint on.
So RMA has been around for a long time. They probably more known for concerts. How long have you guys been promoting comedy shows?
RMA's been promoting comedy shows for several years.
Okay.
A lot of places want a comedian. It's something different. It's not a band. Smaller venues are going to love comedians. Fundraisers, easy comedians. We booked the Dog Pound in Ravenswood. We bring comics down there a couple times a year. Roane County High School on March 13th has a comedy night as a benefit for their athletic boosters. So we've been doing comedy for quite some time.
Cool. John Mike, tell me a little about your story with RMA and how you came to be a part of the group.
Rick Modisett was putting a sign on my a river lot, and he looked kind of worn out, and he told me he had all of these concerts booked. And so I said, well, if you ever need a favor, well, a few weeks later, he needed a favor. He asked me to go cover a concert that night. Well, a week later, I get an email. He needs me to go cover 2 concerts. The third week, I get an email saying he needs me to cover, I'm thinking, some favor. After I covered,
you must have done too good of a job.
After I covered those last couple of concerts, I said, Rick, do I work for you now? He goes, like, yes, you do. So that's how it all started.
And how long has that been?
About 3 years.
Okay. So you travel a little bit to do that? Do you stay local? Or?
I've traveled in the past year. I've been to Missouri. I've been to the Carolinas. I've been to Norway. I've been several places. We RMA got involved with some country music festivals in Norway last year, and we took Cody Wickline with us, and they really loved him overseas.
Cool. So, Chris, you're a local, not from here, but now from here, a local stand-up comic. But the first thing I notice about you is your name. I think it's a cool name. Is that like a stage name or what?
It's my birth name, man, and it's what I was given, and I thought that it was a unique name. And first time I got on social media, I'm looking it up, and I see all these Chris Abels pop up, and I was like, what? I was like, okay. So I started friend requesting them all, and became legitimate friends with some of them, and to the point that we confuse people that we actually know, because when I go meet these guys in like Florida and stuff like that, we'll take a picture, the same picture, and use it as our profile picture, and we confuse our legit family with that picture. Like the one guy in Florida, his dad sent me a message the other day. He's like, "Hey son, are you coming over for dinner?" And I said, "What are we having?" And I knew it wasn't my dad. And he said, "We're having. What are you talking about? We're having this and this." I was like, "No, that's terrible." I was like, "I won't be there." He's like, "What?" I was looking forward to you coming over, and I had this guy going for like a half hour, and I never did tell him that I wasn't his son, and his son messaged me a couple days later. He's like, "Don't mess with my dad," and I was like, "Well, it was a good story, man."
Any of them in entertainment or
there is
stand-up or
not stand-up that I found, but there is a Chris Abels. He draws comic books, and he's actually pretty successful. He's worked on a couple movies like Spider-Man and stuff like that, and I sent him a message. I said, "Thanks, man. I'm going to steal your credit." But yeah, he's doing pretty good.
You could have a family reunion of sorts.
Well, I think my ultimate dream would be to have a Chris Abels convention and just bring them all together and
Nobody would need a name tag, just the wives.
Yeah. It'd be even crazier if the wives were like Chris Abels.
So let me ask you about your I guess, start in comedy? I don't know if it was a solid starting point, but kind of what got you into it, or what made you think this is something you wanted to do?
I mean, I always goofed around and stuff like that, and wasn't really class clown, but took a beating in high school, and I had fire engine red hair, freckles, everything, anything that somebody would target, and,
Right.
and I was like, I was going to be in a fight that day, and this was a big
Not
guy.
by your choosing, I
Not
assume.
by my choosing.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't walk into class. I was like, "Hey, let's fight." So he was like, "After school, I've got you," and I was just like, "What am I gonna do? I can't run. I can't." I knew I had to stand up, but I was like, "I'm gonna try to make this guy laugh before he punches me, because maybe the punch will hurt a little bit less." And he did. He started laughing, and he never did punch me. And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm onto something." And but as far as stand up, it didn't start until after college, and I went to my first live stand up show, and when I was sitting there, I was like, "This is something I want to do," and I went and tried it, and I was hooked from that moment, and that's how I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
So, how did you just kind of start at open mics and then try to get different places to let you come up? Or how does that work?
Yeah, and see, I think that's the difference. I've been doing it for a while, and like these newer comedians and stuff like that, they come on the scene and they instantly, oh, I want to do 10, 15 minutes. They don't realize how long 3 to 5 minutes is,
Right.
but that is the part that they call paying your dues, is
Right.
you go do the open mics, you drive 3 hours to go do a show for no money, no beer even,
Right.
and stuff like that. But
They give you a beer tab even after you do that?
eventually, when you start bringing people to their place, they'll give you beer, they'll give you things and stuff like that. But that doesn't come until down the road, because in the beginning you don't have a following unless you're, somebody's son or
Right.
or
There's
daughter.
something to piggyback on, yeah.
Yeah.
So, who would be someone that inspired you, or someone you kind of looked up to as a comedian early on?
When I was a kid, I used to love watching. Every Friday night, Showtime would do a comedy series, and I used to love watching Tim Allen and Gilbert Gottfried, Roseanne Barr, stuff like that. One of my favorites was Bob Nelson. Later on, I fell in love with Norm Macdonald because of his dry sense of humor, and so I think he's one of my favorites. My mentor in the stand-up comedy world is the Reverend Bob Levy, though. He kind of took me under his wing and started giving me advice and put me on shows, and Bob worked for the Howard Stern show for a long time, and I was, as a stand-up, you always want that bigger name comic that takes you under their wing,
Right.
and I just got blessed, and it was him. So
Yeah, so it's definitely more than being funny. And I mean, there's an art to it and a craft to it.
yeah.
So it just takes time to probably develop all that, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. It takes time to develop what you're doing, and as a stand-up, if you go out and you do a comedy special, like let's say you're going to do a half-hour special or an hour special, or you put out a CD, that might be your best material that you've ever wrote in your life. But at the end of that, you got to scrap it, and you got to come over. You got to be able to come up with more stuff. Yeah.
So you've been around, you've traveled and done stand-up. Have you had the ability to work with some bigger name talent?
Yeah. I was initially blessed with going out on shows with like the guys from Stern and which would be like Bob Levy, Jim Florentine. People might recognize him from Crank Anchors. And then one of the biggest ones that I've worked with was I got to work a show with Larry the Cable Guy.
Okay.
Super nice guy. Like out of all of them, super nice guy. Biggest jerk I ever worked with was Daniel Tosh.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not surprised by that.
I can't. Nowadays he's a nice guy. Back then he was drinking and doing all kinds of stuff. So he was even a bigger jerk, especially comics, I guess, or maybe it was just me. I don't know. I came off stage one night and I said, "What did you think?" I was so excited that I was working with him because that was right before Tosh.0 came out, and he looked at me and he said, "I didn't listen to you." He's like, "I don't get paid to write your stuff," and that's the nice way of saying what he said to me. But I was just like, "Oh man," I was crushed. I was just like, "Wow!" I was so excited to
Yeah, that
work with him.
validation would have meant something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point, I was just like, you know what? I don't care what any of these guys think, and I'm just gonna go out and do my stuff, and I'll do what I do, and that's it.
So let's get back to the show. It's March 21st at the Dils Center in Parkersburg. What is your role in that show?
I'm gonna be the MC.
Yeah, the MC for the night.
Yeah, the MC. So I'm very excited because I moved to this area not too long ago, and I've known about Parkersburg Homecoming and stuff like that. And then when I seen the comedy show, I met this guy, and
life went down from there.
Yeah, it's going down. Yeah, so
Spiraling
I'm like,
out of
I
control.
can officially retire. So, no, we've actually done a couple things together, and we just had a comedy contest last week looking for the funniest person in the MOV area, and that could have been anybody from a stand up to just the guy that everybody says, "Hey, you're funny,"
Right.
and so we had a really good turnout for that, and we picked a winner, and the winner's going to get a guest spot, and the winner is Johnny Miller
In this show?
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
yeah, and he goes by the Redneck Connection. Funny guy, very funny guy. So I'll be emceeing. Johnny will open up for Juanda and Mike, and this is going to be a very fun show.
John, Mike, do you want to go over, since you're the booking agent, I guess, or the, I don't know what you're calling, you're putting the show on, I guess. You want to tell me who's going to be there in addition to Chris?
Yeah, on the 21st, first off is Mike Conley. He's a 25-year comic. He's out of the Akron area. He does a lot of observational humor.
Okay.
Talks about his life growing up in the 70s to being middle-aged in the new millennium. So he has a lot of stuff to talk about. I mean, everybody has a life. Everybody's life's funny at some points in time. Sometimes you have some low times. Sometimes your life is written by Mark Twain. Sometimes it's written by, Stephen King. He talks a lot about that. He also just looks around at people and, sees what they're doing, because most people don't pay attention.
In the crowd?
He does, yes. He pays attention to what you're doing, so he'll make a lot of observations on some folks.
Yeah, if you're sitting up front, be careful, right? You're fair game.
You're in the first 4 to 5 tables there. Yeah, you may be the butt of some of his jokes by the end of the night. And then we have Juanda Mayfield. She's definitely one of a kind. She started out impersonating people at her church. That's a good way to get into heaven. Okay. She's also the winner of Ohio's Funniest Comedian. She does a lot of perspective on life as well. She talks about fat people. She talks about relationships. She talks about food, children, anything that's funny, because all those are funny topics. And
Sure.
That's just the tip of the iceberg for her. She'll have people holding their sides by the end of the night.
Cool. So, where can people, if they want to find more information on this where can they find that?
Tickets are available. Tickets are available at the Blennerhassett Museum. They're available at the Sound Exchange, Outback Steakhouse. There's commercials on Cass Cable that should be starting to run this week. There's a lot of information, plus anybody with the Homecoming board, you can go to the Parkersburg Homecoming Facebook page or Parkersburg Homecoming website for more information on the event.
Okay, so if you're listening to this, I'll link it in the podcast description. If you're watching it, then I will put a link in there somewhere in the comments or in the description to Parkersburg Homecoming's website or their Facebook page. Can you show up the night of? Is it too late? Or?
You can show up the night of. The Dils Center has been great to work with. Vinny and Angela down there are doing an outstanding job, bringing in, creative things. And it's going to be a great night. But yeah, you can show up the night of. I mean, we'll let you in if you walk up to the door.
So it's the second annual Parkersburg Homecoming Comedy Night presented by RMA, and it is March 21st at, doors at 7, showtime at 8, and Chris will be there to get things
We'll
rolling.
be there, yes. And if you're sitting in the front row, I'll tell you guys what it is with the front row. People will ask me, they say, "How come you always pick on front row?" Because when the
all you
lights
can
are
see.
on you, that's all you can see.
I love that. So
Yeah.
I love stand-up comedy, but I love and I've seen them in the big theaters, and you probably can't see anything in the big theaters.
Right.
But in the smaller clubs, it's kind of neat because when you start talking to the crowd, it's off the top of their head. It's not, they're kind of playing with you. It's not the normal routine or whatever.
Right.
I love that kind of interaction.
Yeah, you can't write. You can't.
You don't know who's going to be there.
Yeah.
So that should be a fun night for everybody. It's March 21st at the Dils Center. Doors at 7, showtime at 8, and the tickets are $20.
$20.
All right. Well, I appreciate you guys swinging by.
Thanks.
We'll definitely have to do this again, maybe for some other shows that RMA's putting on
Great.
in the area and some other stuff you have going on.
Great. Yeah, thanks, man. Or you can get your tickets by calling 304-494-2647.
Who does that connect to?
Me.
We'll make sure we get your number out there then so everybody can bother you,
Thank you.
for tickets at 3, 4 in the morning.
Yeah, write it everywhere. Write it on bathroom walls,
Yes.
wherever you want to
Yes.
put it.
All right. Well, guys, I appreciate your time, and we're looking forward to the show.
Thanks.
Thank you.